So welcome this evening to the Trachtenberg School MPA Alumni Panel on Multisector Career Paths. We have been running this panel for many, many years, and it's always fascinating to hear the different sectors, the different pathways of all of our alumni who we have coming to us from different parts of the country today. So I am thrilled and just really want to express my appreciation to our alumni panelists for taking time out on a Wednesday night to share some insights with all of us. So I've asked each of you to start with just having a brief overview about your current work and your career path to get there. And then we're going to go ahead and open up to questions. And Bridget, you're first on my screen, so I'm going to go ahead and start right with you.
Oh boy. Hi everyone. My name is Bridget, pronouns she, her. I'm in the Arlington, Virginia, DC area. I actually just finished my MPA in 2023. I worked the full time that I was in my MPA program, the current place I work. So I'm a senior associate for a company called the Cadmus Group, which is a predominantly federal government contracting firm. And in my role, I supervise a team of staff who work across federal, state, local, tribal, territorial governments to implement climate resilience programs. So one of the largest clients that I work for is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. But I also have helped develop resilience plans for major states across the country. And I also lead a lot of our business development work and operational work for the firm. So how do we win new work and how do we grow and expand our capabilities? Looking forward to it. Thanks all.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Bridget. I will pivot over to Jessica.
Hey everyone. Good to see you all. My name is Jessica. I graduated from the Trachtenberg School in spring of 2020. So we got to do our capstone projects virtually because of COVID. So I was the first kind of COVID class. So let's see, I was a teacher before coming to Trachtenberg. So I taught middle school English. I was in K-12 education, and I also worked as a director of operations at a charter school. That sort of brought me, the operations and policy side of education brought me to Trachtenberg. When I was in Trachtenberg, my concentration was program evaluation. And then once I graduated, I worked at a higher education consulting firm in DC called Higher Ed Insight. And then a year after I graduated, I got married and got pregnant with my first son. So I was a full-time mom for uh, going on 3 years. Currently a full-time mom. I have my second son. And about 8 months ago, I started my own consulting firm so that I could work sort of for myself and do contracts that I wanted to do. And it's super part-time. So I am a parent first and second, a worker.
Fantastic. I love having all the different perspectives here today. We're going to move over to Ryan in Georgia.
Someone had to do it. All right. Sorry, I'm Ryan Greenstein with the YMCA of Metro Atlanta. I graduated, I guess, 2 years ago. So yeah, Bridget, we must have been in the same class. I think I was 2023. And recently grew up in Georgia, recently moved back probably about 4 or 5 months after graduating with my MPA. So most of my professional career has been up in DC. I was the legislative director for the National Association of Attorneys General, and then pivoted to a more public health focus for advocacy on Capitol Hill with a group focused around the overdose crisis. And then when I came down to Georgia, I worked at the Carter Center, which is Jimmy Carter's foundation, on their mental health public policy team. And am now in a newly created role. The YMCA is the largest provider of swim lessons in the country. And we recently got approached by some funders to see what we could do in the advocacy space. So I'm currently leading our drowning prevention advocacy and kind of creating it as we go.
I'm always amazed sometimes hearing people's jobs being like, who knew that that job even existed, right? And I remember when I saw your title, Ryan, your new role, I was fascinated. I'm going to move over to Houston, to Cindy.
Hi, everyone. Cindy Mejia. I work at the University of Houston here in Houston, Texas. I manage an initiative that's Transfer Pathways, where the university is a lead institution for a partnership with 7 two-year institutions and 7 four-year institutions here in the Houston region. I've been in higher ed now for about 12 years. I graduated my MPA in 2011, so it's been a while. But so I've been in higher ed. My concentration was actually education policy when I was at the Trachtenberg School. So it kind of fit well with what I do now. I did take 6 months, in case anyone is interested in learning about that, but I did 6 months for a higher ed search firm, which is interesting work as well. So happy to share any information.
Fantastic. And now we'll bring it to Boston to Sarah.
Thanks, Denise. Hi, everyone. Sarah. I graduated from Trachtenberg also in 2020. So Jessica, we probably cross paths at some point, but nice to see you all. As Denise said, I live in Boston and I work for the Fidelity Foundations, which is a group of private foundations here in the Boston area working on capacity building grants. So we fund organizations local to the New England area and some regions also across the country, although that's quite small. And so my background is really in nonprofit management and sort of switched to philanthropy after I graduated from Trachtenberg about a year after. Prior to Trachtenberg, I was working at a local nonprofit in DC called Youth Service America, doing their grants management. I then worked at Share Our Strength, which is also known as No Kid Hungry, focused on anti-hunger initiatives and did the grants management work there. And then moved to Boston during the pandemic to be closer to family and wound up here at Fidelity Foundations. So happy to talk to anyone about, working while in school or anything nonprofit related as well.
And look at that connection. I was at No Kid Hungry too for a brief period.
I think we might have talked about that very briefly when I was a student, but yeah.
That's so funny. That's so great.
Yeah.
So at this point, we definitely have all different experiences, all different sectors, all different pathways. As I mentioned earlier, I'd rather have all of you ask questions. So I'm going to pause and open this up to questions. Either you can type it in the chat or raise your hand, ask questions. I could ask questions, Jennifer could ask questions, but I'd rather open it up to all of you. Great. Will is going in. Fantastic, Will. We'll start with you.
Hi, guys. Thanks for being here and talking with us. I'm sure we'll really enjoy it and get a lot from it. I guess just to start things off, I'd be curious, what's a skill or maybe a course you took, some sort of professional skill that you got while you were here at GW, and how that really helped you advance in your career, or maybe something you use every day?
I love that question. I'm going to add one piece to it, something that often comes up in alumni panels. What skill did you get when you were at Trachtenberg that's been really helpful, or skills? What do you regret? You're like, I should have taken this class or delved deeper into something that you look back, if you did, that you wish you had taken the opportunity. So who's ready to start with that one?
I can. Oh, go ahead, Bridget. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I can kick things off. So I really deeply valued my public budgeting class. I think that's 05 or 06. That was huge, especially like I work in and with the federal government. So both understanding what the federal budget process is really important and how it functions, and sharpening my Excel skills, because many of us say we are advanced with Excel on our resumes, and then we get hired and people are like, do things with Excel. And you're like, yeah, I will. So that was incredibly helpful. And then I also got a lot from my topical classes. So I did graduate certificates in both GIS and emergency management and emergency preparedness, which sort of intersects with the work that I do now. And so the technical skills I built on the GIS side were really helpful for all the data analysis that I work with today. And in general, just learning sort of the theory behind a lot of these concepts and the way to think about these concepts to be able to give good advice to the clients that I work with, I would say are the big things.
Great. Ryan, did you want to add in now?
Yeah, mine's a little bit of a flip. My budgeting class was online, and I should have done that one in person, not over the summer, because that's a skill I think I could have gotten more out if I had done the full semester version, or had taken another class of it. That's something I think I could have done better. The classes that really stuck with me, I took a class through, I think, School of Media and Public Affairs with Professor Loge. That was incredible. He's fantastic and really kind of changed a lot of my views on communication, and especially as someone who does a lot of lobbying and advocacy, kind of around framing issues. So if I'm going up to talk to a congressional office from Ruby Red, Nebraska, or from Deep Blue, Berkeley area, how do I talk to them about the same issue and win their support? And he was really wonderful. And I don't think a lot of students always realize that how many classes outside of just Trattenberg are at your fingertips. Because the other class that really resonated with me was a summer one just for a week with what the business school, just to get the last few credits to graduate on futurism. It was taught by someone from the State Department who was also incredible, and kind of really changed just kind of a lot of my views on work in general, and working towards the future and recognizing signals of what's coming down the pipe. And again, it exposed me to a lot of people that were not also Trattenberg. I got pretty used to at the end seeing a lot of the familiar faces, and it was fun having instead of a lot of nonprofit and federal employees. There was a lot of Deloitte and business people that also kind of exposed me to a different group of students than would get in most of my other classes.
That's great. Who else wants to share?
I would say for me, I can't remember the course name, but applied statistics was really beneficial. Even though I'm not constantly crunching numbers or anything like that, or like working with Excel sheets, but just having that knowledge when we look at data, because my institution's very data driven. So that was helpful.
I can jump in and actually build on that. So my quant background I was a communications major in undergrad. So like there was no quant background, and I was in like fight or flight for all of that applied statistics and research course, so much that like it really couldn't sink in because I was so panicky. So what I did as an MPA, which everyone was like, you're so crazy, was I took, what is it? What's the next one? That teaches econometrics, because I was like, I don't like that statistics class. It didn't resonate with me. I mean, I was like, I really do want to learn this. So it was probably the hardest class that I took. It took the most amount of hours and just sheer like studying. But I'm in general consulting education. It's a lot of policy, it's a lot of research, it's mostly qualitative. So I'm not like out here building models, but there have been times where my bosses had asked me in the past to really analyze a quantitative survey. And if I hadn't known how to do that, I would have just been like, would have been really embarrassing. And I would have had to learn it on my own, and then you just don't know. So if you really want to push and really want to make yourself marketable, I would if you get some good stuff out of the applied statistics course, great. If you still need more, I would go for it. I loved it. It was my favorite class.
I would also add to that, similarly, I struggled through the statistics class because I didn't have a background in it. But then after the fact, I took a class, I can't remember the name, but it was like policy of hunger and homelessness, which was relevant very much so to my background, but like the statistics part, I was like, I don't understand any of this. And as an MPA, I was in a class of exclusively MPP students, and I really pushed myself that semester. Like it was a struggle for me, but I got such a different perspective than I might have had I not taken the class, just because like they had different classes to start than I had. And so I really appreciated that, and made me sort of like think about my job differently since it was applicable. And the other class that I'm sure everyone would agree with is program evaluation. I think that it's a class that I was like, oh, this will be cool, but I actually use the skills that I learned in that class on a regular basis, probably not actively thinking like, oh, this was program evaluation, but I use them all the time in my day-to-day work. So I found that class to be super invaluable.
Great. Who else has a question? This was a great opening question to get us started. Yeah, like me.
Hello. I'm curious. So, as someone who also works full time, and I am in my my first semester, and I have worked full time for some time now. I've how was the experience like for you, like throughout the 2 years, 2.5 years, however long you did it, to balance, I guess, your day-to-day with work and your social life, your priorities and the class loads, and was there anything in particular, I suppose, like on campus resources or like how were you able to balance all of that? And I have like I've basically worked full time the entire time I've been in school, like undergrad as well, so it's not a foreign concept, but I'm just curious because I think it always helps to hear from other people about how they balance their workloads.
I can jump in to start. One thing that I always did, and I have some colleagues who are now in grad school, and I recommended this to them, was like having one day a week where you didn't focus on school. I think for me, because I was working full time and going to school at night, if I wasn't in class, I was likely writing a paper, doing some sort of homework, and so I always dedicated Sundays to myself. Some weeks were better than others. There are certainly times like midterms and finals where like that's not the case, but for me, I found that easier to be able to say like, oh, I can make plans, with friends or do whatever I need to do on a Sunday, knowing that I had that time for myself. And also it like gave me something to look forward to every week of like, okay, if I just make it the next 2 days, like I'll have a break from this and then I can kind of reset. So that's what I found helpful. It doesn't work for everyone. Again, some weeks are better than others, but that's kind of what I did.
Yeah, and I worked full time my entire MPA except for the first 2 months, and then I got a job. And it is definitely a constant balancing act, and it's a balancing act whether you're working full time or you have internships or you're trying to do research or whatever. Right? There's so many different ways to be involved. There's the normal strategies of like front load things, right? Plan out your semester, do the readings ahead of time. As I'm sure you've learned by this point, like you really do have to do the readings in grad school. And you get so much more out of it when you do. So that was huge. And like knowing yourself and your learning style. So I'm a person where as long as I read something and I take some notes on it, it doesn't have to be super fresh. So I could front load a lot of the reading and just review my notes before class to make sure that I was up to speed. But the other thing I would note is I think in some ways, even though it's an absolute balancing act, there are some advantages that come with working full time, especially if you're working in or even adjacent to sort of the public administration space, which, as we know, is a huge field, because you're able to really take like what you're learning in class and apply it immediately. Like I remember my freshman year, my perspectives on public policy or class that taught by Dr. Bernard. We talked all about different theories of thinking about public policy and why do challenges happen. And like I walked into work the next day and I was like, wow, like this is a path dependency problem. And like this comes from this school of thought. And so that really helped me connect the dots. And it also, in some ways, can help prepare you for some of your papers because and other materials, because you're able to bring that experience in and speak to it.
I ended up getting what I thought was going to be a part-time job, but I ended up being full-time while I was getting my MPA. I really enjoyed that job, so I ended up working more than I expected. And just a side note, they are the ones that ended up connecting me, my previous supervisor, to my former employer here at the University of Houston. So it all worked out. But like Bridget said, I was realizing that I was applying a lot of what I was learning in the MPA to my job there with the nonprofit in DC. And just kind of to, balance, I found working with my classmates who also were, kind of study groups and so forth was beneficial because they were also in the same situation of balancing a job and school. Kind of having your support group.
Say also, and I should add, I take this with a grain of salt. I got shingles while in grad school, and they told me it was from stress, which is not normal at the age I was at. So here's my tip after that. If hopefully you have a good relationship with whoever your boss is, but I was very lucky that communicating with them about school needs, they were always very supportive if I needed to, on Thursdays, for example, sneak away so I could have enough time to get to school and not be, sprinting and hungry while getting in the door. So making sure you have that good relationship or can communicate at least your school needs to your boss. And likewise to professors. I turned down a work trip once because of an upcoming paper, and then later got chewed out by the professor, not chewed out, but the professor was, why would you do that? We'll be flexible for your work needs also. And most people have them. So that open communication was really helpful for when crunch time came around and needed extra support from either side.
We got a question, similar question, but different question that some of you are already touching on. This is a great point, is like, what trade-offs did you consider when deciding a certain concentration and or in your career? With different pathways, different decisions you made. This is a great question that I think we all kind of struggle with. I see everybody's thinking about this one. Trade-offs for concentrations into your career.
I can start. I've been thinking a lot about this. So when I was in grad school, my big debate was if I was going to work for the federal government or federal adjacent. You might have some thoughts about why I'm thinking a lot about this right now. And I wound up in the private sector working for the federal government. And for me at the time, one of the things that I realized was really important was I wanted to be able to work on multiple things and issues and projects and challenges that were very different from one another. So I've worked with the New York State government, I've worked with FEMA, I've worked with nonprofits and for-profit companies, all along this same thematic area of sort of climate resilience. And so for me, that variety was really important. And that's part of the thing that drove me towards the private sector, because there was a lot more flexibility on that route. Now, my real passion is in sort of public service, and that's why I now work full-time with the federal government as a contractor. But being in the private sector gave me that flexibility, which was really important. But there's that trade-off there, right? There's the trade-off of not being able to fully be a public servant. There's the trade-off of I work for clients and I work for their priorities and to implement their projects, which means that I don't have as much ownership over sort of the finalization of those projects and where they go after I leave that project. At the time when I was thinking about it, there was a trade-off in stability where the private sector was notoriously less stable than the federal government. We're now seeing that may not be the case, at least in the short term. But those were some of the things that I was thinking about.
Who else wants to tackle this one?
I can chime in. I don't know if anyone is considering my situation, so I'll keep it brief. It's pretty unique, I think, among my classmates. But like I said, when I was right after I graduated, I started working full time, and but my main goal, Denise and I always talked about this, was to start a family. So I really wanted to be a mom and have my first child. So the trade-off there is pretty obvious. But when I was thinking about when I was in school, my thought process was always like, I know this sort of goes against what I said about the econometrics, but for the most part, it was like broad skills, more soft skills, more theoretical skills. Like I wanted to take program evaluation and understand the concept of a logic model rather than like take GIS, because I was like, this is probably a skill I'm going to forget or I'm going to have to refresh myself on. So if you're thinking of maybe doing something that's not going directly into work or full-time work, or if you want to travel or, do something else before you go into career, that was sort of my mindset, was like, well, how can I position myself around these concepts and theories? And so that those are harder to forget than like y = mx + b, even though my econometrics was my favorite, was my baby. So yeah, happy to talk about that more after.
Who else wants to talk about any trade-offs that they've made with their career?
I can jump in kind of similarly to what's already been said. I think for me, like I went to grad school with the understanding and want to continue working in the nonprofit space. And so I went in with trying to calculate how many years, like let's say 6 years of experience prior to school. And so I already had a lot of the skills in some of those intro classes that I obviously was learning more through those classes, but I already sort of could build on those from the work that I was doing. And so I think the trade-offs for me from when I started to when I ended were kind of thinking through like what classes or what skills can I build that I don't already do on a regular basis that I can then translate to various kinds of jobs if I don't want to stay in the nonprofit sector, because a lot of those skills I already did have and was building on, but a lot of the classes I took were completely new to me or were like completely outside of the scope of what I would do on a regular basis that I still use in my work now, working in philanthropy, but maybe we're a little bit outside of the scope of what I thought I wanted to do. And so I think my trade-offs were really just thinking like outside the box, like how can I use these skills from some of these classes? Either if I stay sort of on this career path or if I go elsewhere, how is that applicable in various places? And so that's kind of how I approached it.
Other comments? Other questions from attendees? Great, Kaylee.
Yeah, you guys have touched on this one a little bit, but I just wanted to know, like, have you used your degree in the way you expected to when you started the program?
I can start. I would say absolutely, although I didn't. Yeah, I went into the program as an educator, someone who works in schools, and I was like, I am so sick and tired of the school starting something at the beginning of the year, like an attendance initiative or, a state test score initiative, and then they try it out and then it doesn't work. And then the next semester they try something different and that doesn't work. So then they throw something else at the wall and that doesn't work. Like I was like, I don't know how, but I feel like there's got to be some better way to do this. Insert program evaluation. So yes, now the clients that I work with have those same exact issues. Like we don't know how to use our data, or we don't know, how to make sense of what happened last time and how to learn from it. So I would say absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say like yes, and like I definitely use the skills that I thought I would coming out of the program. And then there are skills that I learned in the program that I was like, I'm never gonna do this. Like budgeting, for example, I was like, this is a good skill to have, but I'm never gonna do this. And I look at budgets most days of the week and I have to analyze them and understand what's in them, understand like how we as an organization can help support them in their growth in fundraising. And so like, yes, definitely the skills that I thought I would use, I do, plus more that I quite honestly was like, I'm never gonna do this ever again. And I'm really glad that I took that class and know what I'm doing because it's really come in handy.
I actually very similar to Jessica. I did Teach for America right before I came to GW for Trachtenberg. And so I was in the classroom with sixth graders all day. And I don't know actually in retrospect what I expected out of my MPA. I knew that I didn't want to be doing what I was doing anymore. And I'd realized kind of like what I heard Jessica say, I wanted to work at a systems level. I couldn't work at an individual level with like one person helping one person. I wanted to work on these policies that affect, hundreds, thousands, millions of people. And I think the couple things Trachtenberg gave me that were incredibly helpful, not having clear expectations, were the ability to think about different types of problems and understand how, when I'm walking into a client situation with problems that I've never heard of before on topics that I'm not the most familiar with, I can think about and develop a framework for them to, adapt or execute effectively. And then relatedly, and I think a couple other people have sort of hinted at this too, in targeted ways, picking up on some of the more technical skills that are aligned with what you're interested in or what you think you'll be interested in. So you kind of have that head start in that career. So for me, it was GIS. For Sarah, it seems like it was accidentally budgeting, and sort of similarly throughout.
I don't know what I was expecting. It's been so long. I graduated May 2011, but I know I do use my degree, and my concentration was education policy. I've always had an interest in education. Didn't know I would end up at a higher ed institution. I probably thought I was going to end up at a nonprofit. But I feel like I use the skills that I obtained from my degree all the time. Even if not directly, like sometimes it just clicks, like, oh, I remember learning this, or I remember encountering this, right?
So I have a question I'll probably use as a wrap-up question. I'm going to kind of lead into it with an answer that I have for this question that the person just asked. Is, I also have a master's in public policy and management, and I feel like, and this kind of fits into this world, what we're talking about, where we're going around AI, that no matter what technology comes out with, what I got in graduate school was learning how to write and think critically. I was so not afraid of challenging and having myself challenged and having my papers rewritten and rewritten again. And that skill, knowing good questions to ask and being open to that growth, I think is such a gift of graduate school, because you can't really do that in your job, right? Like you need to be able to, and you can, but in graduate school, it's a safer space to get that feedback from faculty. So I'm going to add that in my 2 cents, and that kind of leads into my final question for all of you is, as you look ahead to the curve, we have a panel, I just posted one next week on the role of AI in public service and the way the fields are changing. Bridget was alluding to that before, fields that we thought were stable that are not. How all are you thinking about your career, and how to, in some ways, even though it's impossible, as much as you can, future-proof yourself? Be thinking about, what are you doing now in your career, in your professional world, even outside of your job, looking ahead to the curve of things that might be happening, technology and otherwise, in the space or in your own lives. And we'll end with this question, and then we'll open up the breakout room. So I know it's a big question, but it's something that I think in career services, we often are pushing people to really be thinking about beyond just the here. How do you plan for what's next and what's next after what's next, knowing that there's so much unpredictability? Big question. Who wants to tackle that to start?
I can start. Something I'm thinking about quite a lot as I'm seeing people I work with get RIFT or are probationary employees, and I'm looking at my own work. It's something that's very top of mind. I think when I'm in a good headspace to think about it productively, I really focus on, especially in the federal space, as the federal government steps back from providing services it has historically provided, what opportunities does that create for companies, individuals, nonprofits, philanthropies, and others to step into that space? So a lot of what I do is scientific communication and analysis. And so as NOAA, for example, steps back from directly engaging with the people who use its data, products, and services, that also creates an opportunity for translators to come in and help. You still have that data out there. You still have users who need that data and need to apply it to understand their risk. And there's now space for people to come in and understand how to translate that. And so I think for me, it's learning to communicate between lots of different audiences and communicate. And I think, Ryan, you alluded to this, right? Like communicate in a compelling way to different people about the same issue is really important. And trying to see, as things evolve, where does that, as change is hard, it also creates that opportunity. And so where is that opportunity?
Yeah, I would echo that 100%. Working in philanthropy, I think we're constantly keeping an eye towards like what's currently happening and what is the future going to look like, and how can we shift our funding priorities to step in where prior organizations had supported. And then I think from like a technology perspective, this is something we talk about all the time. I think at the core of the work that I do and the work that a lot of my team does is relationship building. And I find some kind of comfort in knowing that like ChatGPT can't build a relationship the way that human to human interaction can. And I think that a lot of the work that we do in philanthropy is centered around relationship building and building those connections between organizations, between funder and grantee. And so that gives me a little bit of hope that like that piece of the work won't go away, even if some of the process pieces, you know, inevitably change with the changing times.
I, as I mentioned, I'm an education policy, education consulting, and it's honestly a great time to be in this field because there's so much opportunity with AI in education. So the way that I've been looking at it is I've just been trying to learn as much as I can about what is happening in the world of AI in education, and I think there's going to be particularly, I think disenfranchised communities, low-income communities and communities of color are going to be left out of the, you know, the direction that this country is going in terms of AI, and those are already the populations that I am most passionate about working with. And so I'm just seeing loads and loads of grants, research grants, project grants to, to bring AI to public schools, community colleges, just raising the digital literacy. But the issue is that I'm not an expert in those spaces. So I am a lot of my work is project-based work that I'm able to bill directly to a client, but a lot of it also is taking Coursera courses, studying, what's coming out, listening to podcasts, staying on top of the trends so that I can position myself as someone who knows what they're talking about if I want to be leading the charge with like, a random public school. I can't just go in and say, hey, let me help you if I don't know. So if there's a ton of learning going on so that I can help pass it all on to communities that might not otherwise get it.
I love that. Anything else anyone wants to add to this last question before we open up for the breakout rooms?
Just add off something Jessica said, with kind of the continuous learning. That continues. I'd say a lot of the people that I've admired most in different roles, and something I do a lot, but try to do more of, is a lot of reading, a lot of podcast listening, and being kind of constantly staying on top of your field, or if you can't stay on, at least keeping up, because there's so many changes in every field, especially right now. There's a lot of reading in my job, and I've noticed, for like I said, people I admire and kind of CEO or executive director roles, the ones that I've admired the most do a lot of learning and a lot of listening. So I echo Jessica's advice. I like that.
I love that around the learning and listening. Is there anything anyone more wants to add before we open up breakout rooms for a few minutes? Cindy, you want to bring it home for us?
Yeah, I'll just say I definitely agree with everything that was said with the learning part, especially in higher ed. Things keep shifting, not just with AI, but just every day is different, right? Within Texas, politics changing things, the way things work. It's just constantly just staying in, informing yourself.
So that is a perfect way for us to open up the groups, because this is why we do what we do. This is why, as I put in the chat, we have so many upcoming workshops and panels. We'd love you all. So please take advantage of this. That is one of the greatest gifts, is that learning and listening. So I want to thank tremendously our alumni panelists today. As always, hearing each of your insights and different career paths, I'm learning and listening. So I want to thank you.